Next will be our panel, Value Creation in Digital Assets Industry. We're honored to have Dennis Lam, founder of Vera Network and IoT Block, as the moderator, Sili Zhao, head of business at Infstone, Stephen Yang, marketing manager at Enchain, and Zira Alexander, VP of Engineering at Reserve, as panelists. Let's give them a round of applause and welcome to the stage.
Hello, everyone. So to begin this meetup, we have a couple of folks here representing some fine projects here. I guess we'll kick it off by allowing you guys to introduce a little bit about your projects to let everyone know who you are, who you represent, starting with Zara.
Okay. Hi, I'm Zara Alexander. I'm VP of Engineering at Reserve. We are a decentralized stablecoin project. We're initially pegged to the dollar. We eventually may move away from that, but that's far enough that I won't go into it too much. Unlike a lot of stablecoins that are focused on something like arbitrage or being useful to the crypto finance world, we're really focused on making a impact, sort of a socially good impact in the world. So there are a few countries that have hyperinflation, where people lose the value of, say you have savings and you have $10,000 or equivalent or something in a savings account, then next week it's worth 6,000, right? Like you can buy 40% less than you could just because of the hyperinflation of the currency relative to goods and services. So people in Venezuela are going through that right now. People in different parts of the world to different extents. So we are focused on helping those folks on the ground. There are a lot of other uses for the token as they come out, but that's where we are. We're also looking to do it in a decentralized way so that people don't have to trust us. Like we will not have the ability to take the tokens away from people or shut it down or devalue it, and also that the world's governments and financial institutions would not be able to do this, even by putting leverage on us or token holders or anything like that.
Before we move on, I guess I want to just have everyone do this. We were talking, of course, backstage, getting to know each other, and Reserve, which is Zara's project, it has some pretty world-class investors, and they're working with some folks in there that have a passion for social entrepreneurship. So, for example, Peter Thiel, the founder of PayPal, is one of their investors. And if you were to say one sentence as to what the vision is of what your project wants to do, what would that be?
One sentence for the vision. That's tricky to capture, maybe. But really, so
I can come back to you.
Yeah.
It's too big.
Yeah. That's too constrained, I think.
Okay, I'll come back to you.
Sure.
Okay. Stephen, go ahead. Why don't you talk about Onchain?
Yeah, so I'm Stephen Yang. I'm the marketing manager for Enchain AI, and we are a blockchain security and data analytics company that is securing business on the blockchain and helping people do business more safely and more confidently. Right now, we have a very heavy emphasis on transparency on the blockchain, bringing more legitimacy so that investors can invest more soundly and more intelligently, and also that people that are already in the ecosystem can perform their transactions knowing full well that they're fully secured and having much more visibility into who exactly they're doing business with.
Great, thank you. And Sili, you want to talk about your company, Infinity Stones?
Yeah, sure. So hi, my name is Sili Zhao, and I'm the head of business at Infinity Stones. So we are a blockchain cloud infrastructure provider, and we have been providing infrastructure for proof of stake or delegated proof of stake blockchain since early 2018. And we noticed the rise of proof of stake consensus since early 2017 by reading all the white papers newly published. And since then, we have been providing reliable infrastructures for the blockchains. And we are now block producers on EOS, Tron, Cosmos, Ontology, Loom, and many other blockchains. And thanks to the support from Bytom community, we're also one of the top 10 block producers on Bystack as well.
So since you mentioned about proof of stake and your services to crypto community, let's talk a little bit about that. I know that, for example, your company right now is working with Bytom, and you've been mentioning how proof of stake and your services has allowed a lot of community members to be more engaged with these crypto projects as opposed to just speculation. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So before proof of stake, we have proof of work. But if you want to participate in proof of work, you have to certain level of technical know-how to set up your own mining machines. But for proof of stake, the entry barrier is much lower because the non-technical community members can just delegate their tokens or vote for different block producers to participate in the ecosystem. So with that, developers and basically the whole industry saw that proof of stake also has a higher performance than proof of work blockchains. So we have seen more investments and more interest deploying into proof of stake blockchains, more DApp or on-chain activities happening on proof of stake blockchains as well. So,
yes. So thank you for sharing that. Now, proof of stake definitely is one type of consensus, and right now in the crypto ecosystem, a lot of these different methods of governance is relatively new, and while people such as a lot of your clients are experimenting with it, there's also a lot of security issues. That's why we have a company such as OnChain who specializes in the issue of security. Would you mind talking a little bit about some of the crazy things you've seen in terms of also proof of stake and security issues, perhaps some case studies that you mentioned, which your company helped uncover thanks to the expertise?
Definitely. So one of our research projects that got a lot of traction actually in the blockchain media is our bot research. And that's really become something that we've seen a lot of industry interest in. We had previously done research into the EOS blockchain, and we found that over 70% of the total transactions and over 50% of the unique accounts were actually run by bots. Obviously, this is a point of great concern for not only people who transact on EOS, but also people who are looking to invest into its associated currency, because it sort of compromises the accuracy of any health metrics that we might derive from the on-chain data. So we're right now comprising a number of metrics into a total blockchain transparency index that we hope will help people invest in more sound and organically grown blockchains. And of course, we're also performing these same bot researches on Tron and also on Ethereum. We hope to do a total case study once we have all three finished.
So you're telling me if I go on coinmarketcap.com, I see different coins, and then I say, oh, it has a big market cap, or oh, there's so many transactions, so many users. Maybe I go to eatscan.io, and I see so many transactions. You're saying that this data is not reliable, correct?
Yes, we would say that it's not 100% reliable, and in fact, it's actually quite prone to manipulation. We're even working with those sorts of reporting and monitoring websites to incorporate some sort of reliability or bot score into their rankings.
And all of us have seen a lot of crypto prices, for example, sometimes out of nowhere they spike, right? And the investors get very happy and it comes down. I know we were talking backstage, we were talking about how even your project would look into these spikes to see what the cause is behind it. Is that correct?
Right. One point of trepidation that a lot of investors have, especially those from legacy finance, with cryptocurrency is that a lot of these classic microcap frauds and financial manipulations are actually completely legal in cryptocurrency. And as you mentioned, one of the most prominent is pump and dump. And we see a lot of front running in cryptocurrency in which people will generate a lot of hype for their ICO, and then they'll cash out as soon as most of the market has invested, leaving a lot of people sort of holding an empty bag. We want to help people avoid this, and I think as a whole, this will bring more legitimacy and more broad adoption to cryptocurrency as a whole.
So the long-term vision of a lot of us here today is to allow decentralized governance via cryptocurrency, via blockchain. And I know that's also one of the big goals of Reserve, stablecoin here. So I know that right now Reserve is working closely to peg it to $1, but can you comment on the long-term vision, and not just on what the functionality is, but what impact that will bring to the world? What problem are you actually solving where a random person on the street should care about Reserve?
So I'll say that a random person on the street, it'll depend on which street, right? So a lot of the problems that stablecoins properly done help to solve are not problems that hit home a lot for the average American, right? But these are problems that do hit home for people in Latin America, for people in Africa, different parts of the world where they don't have the financial infrastructure that we take for granted. And so that's the long-term vision, long-term impact is enabling people all around the world to have secure control over their own money, store of value, without their government being able to like print out a bunch of the currency and devalue it, and without their government stopping them from sending money to family that's, like some people go to one country and try to help their family member back in their original country, but there are all these rules and restrictions depending on the countries that make it harder, make it cost more, make it impossible sometimes. So really we are looking to enable sort of freedom of people to control the value that they create and maintain that for themselves. Yeah.
Can you maybe talk a little bit about an example in Argentina or Venezuela and why this would be a great alternative?
Right. So, I mean, in Venezuela, hyperinflation is so high that people are transferring they'll try to get out of bolivars, which is the local currency, any way they can. If they can get dollars, they will. If they can get Colombian pesos, they will. But it's so bad that they actually will transfer their money into Bitcoin, even though it's being volatile and jumping up and jumping down, because something that's volatile and jumps up and down 40% unpredictably is still better than something that consistently loses value over time, right? So yeah, Argentina a few years ago had a similar problem. Argentina also actually the currency just dropped significantly relative to the dollar when recently they have elections coming up. And once some new polls found that one of the candidates was more likely to win than they thought, then people went, oh no, this is terrible for our economy or for the Argentinian money, and it dropped off, right?
And not to mention, they're paying a much higher premium than market value simply because loan sharks and there's all this shady
Absolutely.
stuff going on. So how many people here today heard of Libra? It's a big commotion in the news. Anyone? Libra? Nobody? Okay.
There's some hands there.
How many
There's
people
most of them.
here just won't raise their
Just
hand no
shy.
matter what question I ask? Just curious. Okay, just kidding. So Libra, as we're talking about stablecoins, is this big hyped thing right now that Facebook and a lot of their friends in the tech corporate circle has kind of joined together to do. How would you say your project differentiates itself from Libra?
Yeah. So one thing to note is that Libra, from the level that Facebook is doing it and that they're partnered with Uber and all these other giant companies, we expect that they're going to run into legal and regulatory restrictions to an extent that we won't for certain reasons that maybe I can go into and maybe I can't, depending on how much time we have. But so PayPal originally, you mentioned that PayPal, some of the original PayPal mafia are investors and supporters of Reserve. One of the reasons for that is because we're trying to do the thing that they wanted to do originally. And the reason that they couldn't was because interacting with the existing banking infrastructure in the US and financial institutions like Visa and the US government caused them to need to restrict their offering significantly. So they had to change what they were making and water it down in a number of ways that made it not useful. So for example, PayPal is not used in Venezuela usefully by people to send money to one another, even though that it is used in the US, right? There are ways in which it is not useful. And so one of the differentiations is that Libra already, right? They came out and almost immediately the US government said bad things about them and said they wanted to restrict them and regulate them in extra special ways. It maybe will impact the entire cryptocurrency industry, regulations that come out of this, but they're very scrutinized and they're very much going to play exactly by whatever the US government tells them to do, basically, right? Yeah, there are other sort of technical details in how they are building their Libra and the protocol, but where it will cause problems for them, we believe, but we're working on writing that up, and I think it would be too specific and technical to get into right now. And we should just wait until we publish that. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing your insight. Stephen or Silly, did you have any comments you want to add with regards to Libra?
I actually completely agree on his stance. I think a lot of us in the crypto community and we at Anchain, we look at Libra and we see it kind of going the way of WePay or Alipay and not really acting as a cryptocurrency. There's an overarching suspicion that they're really just throwing in the word cryptocurrency because it's hip and it'll get a lot of traction with news.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so maybe I will add some positive news to the Libra. So from our business point of view, we think Libra, yes, they are taking the hype as a cryptocurrency, but I think they have somewhat lowered the cognitive cost of getting to know blockchain industry. So because Facebook is doing this, we've seen a lot of people who are formerly doesn't know about the cryptocurrency to be more interested to know what it is, and we have captured this opportunity to educate some of them. And I think that's one of the positive spin of them, taking all the news and hype.
So moving forward, I'd like to discuss a little bit about challenges to the road of decentralization. I know that a lot of us are here because we're generally positive in terms of decentralization is a good thing, right? We want to not have powers be all centralized in one monopoly, whether that's finance and the state together, or just like separation of church and state. Now, we have an individual who has a part project who's working closely with stablecoins and finance, cybersecurity of smart contracts, blockchain, and a service provider that has a platform to enable nodes to enable the infrastructure for various projects. So starting with, I guess, Stephen, would you mind commenting on what do you think are some of the, if you were named 3 key challenges to decentralization, what do you think they would be and why?
First and foremost, I would say that the attitude of a lot of early adopters of cryptocurrency is still very much one towards outlawism. And they have a certain resistance to the regulation and the legitimization that a lot of exchanges are trying to push right now. Second of all, I would say that naturally, as we start to comply with FATF regulations, with governmental regulations, we're starting to see that as a natural consequence of that, there's an increase in centralization, simply because we have to implement KYC, we have to implement AML, we have to avoid funding of terrorism, and all of that requires us to collect much more information than the average crypto user is typically comfortable with. And in fact, we've even seen that with data breaches in which people's KYC information is leaked. And third of all, it's just a matter of reconciling people who are looking to use cryptocurrency as an asset class with people who are using it as a currency. We find that these are typically 2 different types of people. And we do believe that we can cater to both of them satisfactorily, but right now it's always a little bit of a challenge to connect them. And that's something we're trying to do as seamlessly as possible when we communicate with arbitrages and when we communicate with exchanges and when we communicate with the app developers.
Silly?
Yeah, sure. I agree with most of what Stephen said. And from our point of view, we think the most challenging part of, basically achieve decentralization or mass adoption is that the blockchain technology in most people's mind is still about cryptocurrency and banking. And what we want to do is that we want them to know that blockchain technology has much more application in, say, IoT or even voting or cold chain logistics. So we wanted them to know that blockchain, if your business can benefit from greater transparency or veracity, then there is a big chance that blockchain can help your business to achieve that. So I think the biggest challenge is that to find a way to bring in awareness and interest and then educate them about what blockchain technology can do rather than just speculation and banking.
Okay, let's hold that thought. I definitely want to talk to you more about use cases later, but let's finish up this question of Zara.
Yeah, so this is the three challenges.
Yeah, what would you say based on your experience working in DeFi or stable coins, what the biggest challenges are?
Yeah, so one that stands out to me right now is just getting that consistent, good, direct user feedback. because we're doing something that's like directly personal, not just some financial instrument, that we need to know what keeps people from wanting to give enough information that we can do KYC, right? Like this is more than people sometimes might be comfortable with sharing if they just want to send a few dollars equivalent over to their friends, or like use it to buy pizza in a shop or something like that. So figuring out what the concern points are for users with cryptocurrency in general and with wallets, and like having that be most of their money transition over to that. I would say another big concern that's just ongoing, or big thing to think about is like being nimble in face of legal and regulatory changes. Which is something we pay a lot of attention to. And third one, hiring engineers. I'm hiring, come talk to me if you want. But yeah, this is like a universal, I think, concern or struggle for a lot of companies. And that's one of the ones high on my mind, which is not surprising given what I do.
So speaking of challenges, things like KYC, like obviously decentralization usually goes hand in hand with the word anonymity, so privacy, confidentiality, but at the same time on the dark side, you have people that can use bots and whatnot. It's hard to know what comes from what. So do you have any, coming from experience in on-chain, the bots and whatnot, it's been an issue in many industries over the years, such as gaming, So what is your recommendation to a lot of up-and-coming projects? Is it their responsibility to try to address this, or is it something that is beyond the responsibility of one company?
So first and foremost, I always want to make sure I clarify that not all bots are bad bots. We have plenty of bots that contribute healthily to the ecosystem and in productive ways, interact with users and all of that business. As far as individual business recommendations, we do encourage as much organic growth as possible. And occasionally we do run into developers that openly encourage bot activity in their ecosystem purely because it boosts their numbers. But by and large, we are seeing that as time goes on, this is starting to negatively affect their health metrics, and this is something that is coming to light and taken into consideration from an investment standpoint. So we would encourage that developers act now, encourage that organic growth. It will improve the health of their user base, and people will naturally want to interact with a healthier ecosystem. From an exchange point of view, they're already largely on top of that end of things. They're careful to make sure that there aren't too many bot transactions within their ecosystems. But because of the great preponderance of exchange options, some of them obviously exhibit a lot of unhealthy bot-driven activity. And on that end of things, we would encourage users to mostly stick with exchanges that they know to be reliable.
Okay, so there are a lot of projects out there that work with exchanges to try to combat these bot activities. If there was an exchange that doesn't want this issue, would on-chain provide a service to assist with that?
Yes, definitely. We provide a lot of on-chain monitoring services, and of course, bot detection is one of our most requested. It's something we've seen more and more of, especially after we published that US research. It's just one of many metrics that contributes to our blockchain transparency index, which is a generalized score that represents the total health of a blockchain.
Great. So speaking of adoption use cases, I know earlier you did mention you do hope to see more use cases adopting blockchain outside of just crypto or banking. Mm-hmm. Based on you guys working with a number of top engaged crypto projects, mm-hmm. Do you have any case studies or examples of projects that are gaining traction that's not banking or crypto related that you'd like personally?
Yeah, so at the moment, there is really hard to find that kind of project, actually. It's more about gaming and banking and cryptocurrencies applications on blockchain. So, but since we have, participating in different blockchains, focusing on different use cases, for example, like logistics or IoT, we want to bring, different communities together. Because, for example, EOS or Tron, maybe the community is focusing on the gaming and the banking part, but for maybe VChain or IoTex, that's focusing on the logistic or IoT part of the application. So what we want to do is that it's also sort of reflected in our name, Infinity Stones. we want to collect different blockchains as single pieces of infinite stones, put them together, make them all powerful. That's the communities behind them. So boost community engagements and help them to basically connect with each other and to explore different use cases with the blockchain technology.
So given that there's definitely a lot more attention and traction in finance or crypto and payment use cases, what do you think is the biggest bottleneck or challenge to gain further interest in decentralized services outside of those areas, in things like IoT or whatnot?
Okay. Well, if we want to gain tractions in other than those, really famous use cases right now, we have to basically make the users doesn't know they're using blockchain technology. Just like Google, if you want to find something, you Google it, you get the results. You don't have to know that how Google does it. So I think that's one of the biggest bottlenecks is that the user onboarding process is kind of complicated and requires certain technical know-how before the users can really deploy their the app or use the blockchain technology.
So speaking of usability, one of the biggest challenges that hinders usability of blockchain behind the scenes is the security of smart contracts, for example, right? Or even scalability, of course. But speaking more on security, can you comment, Stephen, can you comment on some of the trends that you see innovations in terms of smart contract security?
So right now, the biggest smart contract language by a pretty significant margin is still Solidity. And while that is, of course, a great language, and we see a lot of great development on Solidity, we also see the potential for a lot of exploitation. And in fact, we directly observed some of this exploitation about a year ago when we observed a persistent hacking attack on a gambling DApp called Last Winner, in which a vulnerability in the Ethereum smart contracts allowed for a group of hackers to create bot accounts and exploit their predictable RNG. And they ended up making off with about $4 million in Ethereum. We offer a smart contract auditing service, so we help to detect some of these vulnerabilities in a company's smart contracts. And of course, as time goes on, we're also seeing a lot of smart contract languages that are built specifically to avoid these kind of vulnerabilities. And as time goes on, I predict that, especially as legacy finance starts getting involved, they're going to want to develop their own stuff in-house.
And maybe, Sarah, you can comment on, in your project Reserve, aside from challenges related to, say, government, regulatory, legal, what type of challenges do you see that is more intrinsic to the technology point of view, since you're the VP of Engineering?
So certainly security is incredibly critical. We don't have a whole lot of contract code, but whatever we have has to be really solid. So that's one of the technical challenges. You might call the protocol, like the economic design, a technical challenge. That is a big thing, a big piece there. Also, a portion that we haven't solved yet, but have on our roadmap is like moving into decentralized governance, and that has a lot of, that will involve both like making software to have people coordinate in certain ways, and also thinking about the ways in which rational agents interact and imperfect agents interact.
So speaking of decentralized governance, one topic that is pretty interesting comes to mind, and I'd love to hear your opinions on it. A lot of applications require data from external data sources. So there's this talk on the need for decentralized oracles or decentralized governance of data, rather. Any comments on that topic? What you've seen, what interests you? What things that maybe your projects are looking into?
So yeah, we don't have any specific, like there are certainly uses for oracles. We are not currently dependent on them for our current designs, but certainly keep it in mind as a thing. But it's still, wherever the oracle interacts with the real world for verification, you still have sort of an unsolved problem. And it's not binary, right? So like with anything with security, there's just, you put a lock on the door and then people can pick the lock. And then you put like a camera and then people can, there's just this sort of an arms race, never solved problem entirely. And so oracles are just like another thing that can help, but to a determined enough attacker could abuse and get around that sort of thing too, depending on the use case.
Stephen, any comments?
So we have observed that the security of data is becoming an increasing issue, and in fact, it's a $1 billion market, the black market sale of data. So we actually have railways in place to track some of the cryptocurrency that is used to transact in these data transactions, and we do help companies to pursue and secure this cryptocurrency after the fact, see if we can try and make sure to secure and freeze these transactions. However, right now we don't interact heavily with these oracles directly.
Silly?
Yes, I guess we have the least experience in this project. The only security we concern is our clients' assets and make sure they have their returns and our service security. So yeah, we don't have.
No problem. So one of the last questions, I guess, kind of wrap up this this section on is, what the question is, with all the trends going, what do you see are some of the biggest trends of 2019 right now in the development and innovation of the blockchain world? What's hot? What trends are, probably they're done, the opposite, right? So that's a question for Zara. Start Zara.
Yeah. So it's just a coincidence that you're on this panel, but I do think chain analysis tools are an area that are going to become more and more popular, more and more useful and necessary. Relatedly, like security and infrastructure, there's just too many losses. There's too much at stake, where like the money needs to go to securing and understanding the traffic and the transactions and making them secure, and also detecting bots, detecting like finding money that's flowing through to terrorists or whatever illicit thing, right? So I think that's an area that'll boom. Also, surprise, surprise, I think stablecoins have not had their have not been solved and have not had their appropriate use cases. So I think that there's a lot of room for growth there, despite the market caps of Tether and all of the other stablecoins that are out there right now.
Stephen?
I would say as of late, one of the things that has really boomed is custodians, and we've really seen custodians come into their own as of late as one of the multifaceted solution to the never-ending security problem when it comes to cryptocurrency. I think that's something that's going to continue to evolve until we have something much more resembling a banking system within cryptocurrency. As far as what's actually going downhill, it's always hard to say. I find that within cryptocurrency, we always think we're evolving much faster than we probably end up doing. So we'll see what exactly happens within the next few years. But I do think we'll see a concentration of exchanges. We won't see quite as many as we have right at this moment.
Silly?
Yeah, so I agree with Stephen. So it's hard to say which part of the blockchain is going to fade out or die down at the moment because we're still so early in the development cycle. Well, it's more like in the 90s when we use those only text website to find a cheat code for a game you're playing. We will still use the internet for that, but mostly now people use internet for the interactive content. I think the same story applies to blockchain as well. So now we are seeing a lot of traction in decentralized finance, in banking. But I think, as I mentioned before, any business, if you can benefit from greater transparency and greater veracity, you can potentially apply blockchain technology and integrate that into your business. And think what I would like to see is in the next few years, we can see more and more different use cases other than finance and banking that are utilizing the blockchain technology. And
I guess with the crypto market evolving, I just want to hear your opinion to let the audience know. Do you guys think altcoins will come back?
Well, at the moment, Bitcoin is certainly still the big brother in the market, but it depends on how we use blockchain and cryptocurrency in the future. I think some of the altcoins is definitely going to come back, but we will see more, like Stephen mentioned, concentrating in exchanges. I think we will see more concentration in user cases or applications and utilization of certain public blockchains. So we will see concentration in market capitalization, in value, in certain altcoins, but certainly not as crazy as back in 2017 or 2018. When we can see a lot of different projects just launching altcoins outright.
I'm hesitant to say they ever really went away because there's something of an ever-present element of cryptocurrency. But I do think, by and large, we're going to see much more concentration, as he already mentioned. I think people are looking for something with much more visibility, and they're less emphasizing the feature richness of a potential coin and more emphasizing the usability of the coin, because that barrier to entry really has proven to be a problem over the years with regard to broader adoption.
Yeah, so I think that I agree with most of what my panelists have said, and that there will continue to be sort of niche targeted coins that maintain value or like grow from where they are. That'll be sort of scattered about some value across those, but then sort of concentration into the most useful core coins. Yeah.
All right, last question, fun question. This New Year's, December 31st, 2019, what's your bet on Bitcoin price?
Oh no.
We're going
So-
for what, 2020?
No, this Christmas, or this New Year's.
This just in
New Year's.
All right,
three or 4 months.
This
What's
New
Bitcoin?
Year's and next New Year's, okay, two
Yeah.
bets.
Well, I'll go first. So end of this year, let's use a fun number, 18,837. And next year, probably $35,000.
18,000 by Christmas and 35,000 next year. Bullish.
I like something around 12,500 for the end of the year. By next year, I like something closer to 15 or 16,000.
Okay.
What is it today? Did you check?
It's around 10,000.
10,300 something.
Then that's my bet.
Right around the
Yeah.
same.
10,000. It's right around.
Yeah.
And next year? 10,000? Quite stable.
Yeah.
Very stable. From the stablecoin company. So, yeah, so I guess, how much more time do we have? I think we're
Yeah,
wrapping.
3 minutes.
Yeah, 3 minutes right there. So, last questions to wrap this up. Since the title of this talk is Value Creation in a Digital Assets Industry, why don't you guys conclude with being part of your company, what value do you hope to bring into the digital assets industry? If you can summarize in that one vision statement that you have.
So the lack of financial instrumentation around cryptocurrency, like there are some instruments that are coming around, but there's still a lot that exists in the paper money world that does not exist with digital currency. So in terms of digital assets, stablecoin lending is getting bigger and bigger. There's value provided through that. I've already spoken a lot to our focus on individuals on the ground, so I'm trying to speak to different parts. But yeah.
Right now, we really focus on the creation of endemic financial regulation to make people feel more comfortable with cryptocurrency as a whole and to make businesses feel much more comfortable entering the space. If they feel it's more stable, more regulated, and less prone to manipulation, we really think people will want to adopt it.
Yeah, so for us, I guess the image for a staking service provider is always, are you guys producing blocks and then distribute some rewards back to your voters? But that's just, I guess, a method of us getting into different projects. The focus of our company is that we want to basically increase the engagement in different communities, and we be the bridge between different communities. And then we want to use this chance to educate the community and help each ecosystem to achieve organic growth. And that way, we think we are not just producing blocks and tokens, but also adding value to the ecosystem and the community by increasing its awareness and its utilization.
Well, guys, thank you for sharing your thoughts and all the questions today. my name is Dennis, the moderator for this section of the event. I'm the CEO of IoT Block, and I would like to personally thank the Bytom team for bringing different people from different sectors of the blockchain ecosystem together. So today we saw Zara representing Reserve, which is a world-class stablecoin in the making. We have Steven, that's part of On-Chain, a world-class cybersecurity, blockchain cybersecurity expert. And we have Silly, who's working with world-class cryptocurrency and public blockchain projects to provide the infrastructure they need to increase community engagement. So as we look forward to the close of 2019, 2020, as things continue evolving, we hope that we look forward to see what comes out in your roadmap, and maybe Reserve could be used in Africa or Latin America sometime next year in trials. It would allow unbanked individuals to have a way to have secure control of their wealth with no fear from censorship or dictators, right? We have projects that we can know are guaranteed to be secure, where they won't be speculated or have any malicious attacks based on bots. And we have companies that want to innovate in blockchain or create their own crypto or public blockchain, but they don't know much about the DevOps or the backend stuff to how to get all the nodes working together. So we have Infinity Stones, interestingly, to assist with that. So I want to thank you for everyone's time today. And if anyone have any questions after, feel free to come up, reach out. I'm sure they can trade contacts. I'm happy to talk about my take in blockchain as well. Thank you, everyone.